put it down. We grow up and we learn to adapt with what we know. Now, the definition of intelligence is the ability to adapt. I'm ready for school. I open the door and it's raining and sleeting and it's cold and what do? I go and I put on a jacket, I put on a sweater, I bundle up. I adapt to a different environment. I'm walking home and the sun comes out, it's 90 degrees. I take off my coat, I take off my sweater, I adapt. The definition of intelligence is the ability to adapt. So the question then must be, to what do you adapt? What is your motivation to adapt? And whose adaptation model are you going to follow? Now, the Bible gives us two models to follow: God's way and man's way. Now, men, they've come up with several hundred different things. There are over 700 schools of psychology. There's over 750 philosophy books. But God said, one, me. Now, man has done a wonderful job of creating and imagining and rewriting and revisiting and things like this. And this is what fascinates me when people talk to me about psychology. They'll say, well, do you think psychology works? I say, yes. I said, but here's why. Here's something that most people don't know. I tell people whatever is good in secular psychology, non-biblical psychology, you can find in the Bible. It's all the stuff they add to it that puts an animosity between, quote, the religious people, the Bible people, and the worldly secular people. But let me show you something. God, y'all know about God. This is Christmas time. You see a lot of movies on TV about God. So God said, let us make man, and he made us body, soul, and spirit. The flesh, the mind, and the spirit. Now, the body is the part that says, here's what I want. This is what makes me feel good. The spirit is the part that says, this is what's good for you. And the mind is the part that serves as the buffering between the two. Now, I'm sitting in church. Paul in the book of Romans said, with my mind, I serve the law of God, but with my flesh, the law of sin. There's a war in my members. And that's the best definition of conflict that you can find. There's a war in my members. Now, I'm sitting here on the front row listening to Pastor Cedric Johnson preach a message, and I'm saying, wow, that's probably the best, most spiritual message from the best preacher of all time. And I'm not just saying that because he's sitting over there. I want you to know, I truly believe that. And he's preaching this wonderful spiritual message, and my spirit is being fed. And all of a sudden, my flesh decides to interrupt and says, Alan, shh. Alan, what? Let's go eat. Well, I can't leave now. Pastor hasn't concluded his message yet. And this is such a wonderful message. He says, feed me, Seymour. I'm hungry now. I said, but we have to wait. He goes, if we wait, the Baptists will beat us to Luby's. We need to leave now so we can get first pick. And I've got this war in my members. My flesh says, feed my flesh. And my spirit says, no, I'm feasting on this spiritual talk. So my mind decides to play referee. Well, you know, we can always watch the podcast, listen to the podcast later. You know, we can always purchase the DVD. We could text Pastor and ask him if he would send us the notes. We can watch him on YouTube. Let's go eat now. And I tell people this is the wonderful thing about being a doctor. See, if you get up and walk out of church, people look and they go, I wonder where he's going. But when you're a doctor, you just reach in, grab your phone, you put a concerned look on your face, and you start walking out. And people go, oh, he's a doctor. He must have an emergency to go to. Oh, I shouldn't have admitted that with Pastor sitting right. Anyway, so my mind says, here's a solution, and we compromise. And this is exactly what we do. Here's what's right. Here's what I want. How can I justify both? Now, which one is going to take precedence? How many times have we ever said, I can't believe I just did that? Has anybody ever spent too much money at Christmas time and come January said, I can't believe I spent all that money? Has anybody ever eaten a little bit too much and said, oh, I think I ate too much? See, we say, I know what's right, I know what's wrong, I know what's good for me, but we give into this thing that the Bible calls lust. What we want. Do we always do what's best for us? No. We make wrong decisions. Now, when we sin or break the law, when people come to me, nobody ever says, I didn't know that. A man comes to me and says, my wife is mad at me. I'll say, why? He said, well, I was flirting with this girl at work and I asked her out. I said, the Bible says thou shalt not commit adultery. Nobody ever says, it does. I didn't know that. Well, no wonder she's mad. I guess I'll have to break my date. They knew that adultery was wrong. They knew they were married. What are they asking this girl out for when they know it's a sin against God? It's a sin against the wife. Lust. I made a wrong choice. I'm sorry, honey. I was wrong. Somebody once told me, he said, how do you never apologize to somebody? I said, well, you can't, but the best way is not to do something that you need to apologize for. See, what is the old saying? It's easier to get forgiveness than permission. However, whoever came up with that never dealt with the consequences of sin. Yes, you can be forgiven, but you still got the consequences. I get a brand new credit card, and I run and I spend it and I fill it to the hilt. And I say to my wife, I'm sorry, honey, I spent recklessly and I ran the credit card up and forgive me. And she says, I forgive you. But the credit card company says, we still want paid. I still have the consequence of my choice to deal with. Honey, will you forgive me? Yes, but now trust has been broken. Reputation has been broken. Standards have been broken. There's some underlying anger. And even though we Christians say, I forgive you, the fact is we're human. We don't forgive perfectly. We remember. Now, God said, I forgive you and I will remember it no more. And a lot of people think that means to forget, and it doesn't, because God can't forget anything. It's actually a legal term that says, I will never bring it up again. I will never mention it again. I counseled a young lady, and she was a wonderful Christian woman who understood this concept. Her husband cheated on her, had a 9-month affair. And it was discovered, and he pleaded with her, please forgive me, please forgive me. And she said, I forgive you. And he went to some counseling, and he went, and he trying his best to restore, and he said he would never see the girl again. And the wife was willing to forgive him. Now, to show you how long ago this was, they went to Blockbuster. And she said, oh, here's a movie I've been wanting to see. Can we rent that? And he said, oh, that's a wonderful movie. It is so good. She goes, when did you see this? He said, well, when I... And she looked at him and said, well, if it's a good movie, do you mind if we watch it again? He said, no, then it'll be fine. And they took the movie home. They watched the movie. A few days later, they're in downtown Houston, and there's a restaurant. She says, I've always wanted to eat here. Can we eat here for lunch? He said, oh, they got great food here. She said, when did you eat here? He said, when I, she said, well, if the food's good, do you mind if we eat here? He said, no. She said, well, great. So then she's in my office, and I said, and how did you feel watching that movie and eating at that restaurant? She said, well, The food and the movie had a lot in common. I wanted to shove both of them down his throat. I said, well, what did you say to him? She said, oh, I didn't say a word. I watched the movie and told him afterwards it was a great movie. I ate dinner and told him, oh, it was great food. And I said, and that was difficult? She said, very difficult. But I told him that I forgive him, which means I will never bring it up again. But the feeling is still active. Now, we're called disciples, which is where the word discipline comes from, because Christianity is a discipline. God said, my ways are different than your ways. So we learn God's ways, but because we have a fallen, carnal, and self-centered nature, it's difficult for us. Now, where does our nature come from? In the beginning, God, remember him, I mentioned him a few moments ago, he put man in the Garden of Eden. And I tell men, man was formed from the dust of the ground. That's what the Bible teaches, correct? And I asked people, I said, did you know that's what dad stands for? And they go, really? I said, yeah, dumb as dirt, because that's where he came from. Now, people laugh, and I said, well, what did God do? He made Adam and then set him loose in the garden. He said, that boy needs help. He can't program a VCR. He can't remember where he left his car keys. He doesn't know how to boil an egg. That boy needs help. So he created a helpmeet. Now later, we call it a wife, but what was his words? I'm going to make for you a helpmeet. Now, if you'll allow me to use my sanctified, dignified Christian imagination, I think the conversation was something like this. God said to Adam, I'm going to make you a partner. She will be soft and warm and cuddly, and you'll be attracted to her. And she's going to meet your emotional needs, and she's going to make you tingle all over, and she's going to be there for you. And he said, whoa, wait a minute. What will this cost me? And God said, 1 rib. He said, that's all? Go for it. And then he's talking to Eve, and he said, he's going to be your protector, your provider. He's going to be your leader. He's going to be the one that sets the stage. He'll be your comfort. He'll be your source of strength. And she says, what will this cost me? And God looked at her and said, you have to pretend he's in charge. The boy needs help, something desperate. And she says, okay. So I remind husbands, listen to this for psychology, and wives, there are 4 main roles in marriage. Well, 5 if you count the cinnamon rolls, but there's 4 main roles. The husband, God in his infinite wisdom said to the man, you're the head of the house. But at the same time, God said in his infinite wisdom, but you need help. And I tell men, notice God did not build you a bar with 10 drinking buddies. He gave you a woman. And he says to the woman in his infinite wisdom, you are to be subject to the man. You are to be submissive. And she said, really? He says, but you also need to help him, because remember DAD, dumb as dirt. Now, when a husband fails to be a spiritual leader, fails to be a head of a house, there's trouble in the marriage. When the husband is dominating, domineering, egotistical, he's not a Christ-like example, there's trouble in the marriage. But on the other side of the spectrum, when a husband refuses to include his wife, when he refuses to ask for help, when he refuses to consult her, he's violating the very thing that God himself ordained. You need a helper. I've given you a helpmeet. We call her a wife. Now, same thing. When she says, fine, do it your own way, just leave me out of it. I'm sick and tired of arguing with you. Then she's abdicated the role that God gave her. She is supposed to be a helper. When she tries to usurp authority and become the head, that also creates problems. So we have this delicate balance. Can I be the head of the house while respecting my wife's opinion? Can she be submissive without being taken advantage of? Can she be a helper without trying to usurp authority? Now, this is the balance that God has given. And one of the main problems we have in the world, not only with husbands and wives, but with relationships, is when we forget this. When I go to work, now I'm a Erlen and dyslexia specialist in a school system here in Houston, and the principal is my boss. And my principal does not have a PhD. She has a master's degree. But you know what? She's the boss of the school. So she comes to me and says, Dr. Kitay, I want you to be in room 200 this year. But I'd rather have room 202. Well, guess what? I'm not the boss. I have to learn obedience to authority. The Bible said that Christ learned obedience. In the book of Galatians, it says, a child when he's young has tutors and governors over him, though he be Lord of all. Prince Charles one day will be king. But when he was a kid, somebody said, get your elbows off the table, quit smacking your lips, sit still, get your homework done. And like the movie Lion King, which is one of my favorite movies, Simba says, someday I'm going to be king. And Yazoo looked at him and said, but you're not king yet. And we forget this. I have authority here. But when I'm at school, my principal has authority over me. Now, I still get to make the choice. Does this violate my belief system? Does this violate my morality system? Can she order me to do something illegal? No, I have the right to refuse unlawful orders, but there's a right way to refuse. You have to explain. You have to go through the system. See, but we still have rule number 1. All behavior is chosen. Now, when we put the other things in that God has ordained, there's a hierarchy of authority. There are relationship rules. There's a right way and a wrong way to do things. I tell the story about the man that comes home and says to his wife, honey, I'm quitting my job down at the dump. I'm going to be a brain surgeon. I watched TV last night. Them surgeons make a lot of money. What you think? She says, why, you dummy. Number 1, it's pronounced surgeon. Number 2, you have to have gone to college. Now, you graduated 8th grade barely. How are you going to be a surgeon? Also, it costs a lot of money to go to college. We got what, $13 in the checking account? Now, quit being stupid. Go beg for your job back and quit being ignorant. Did you feel the love of Christ? Did she help him and build his ego and his status and his reputation? Did she make him feel like the head of the house? No. Now, here's a man married to a Christian woman. He says, honey, I'm quitting my job down. I'm going to be a brain surgeon. Them surgeons make a lot of money. She goes, oh, that's so wonderful. I love how you plan ahead, how you think ahead. You're always looking out for room for, what can I do to help you? He said, get on that computer of yours and figure out what I need to do to be a brain surgeon. She says, all right. Next day, he says, did you get all the information I need? She says, did you know them French people talk funny? They pronounce it surgeon instead of surgeon. Now, honey, when you get around them, say surgeon so there won't be any clash of culture. He goes, surgeon? She said, no, surgeon. Okay, I'm going to be a brain surgeon. I'm going to be a brain surgeon. She says, good. He goes, what do I need to do? She goes, well, number 1, you have to have an AMA accredited medical degree from a university, and it's an 8-year program. She said, now, I know you graduated 8th grade with honors, and I know you're an intelligent man. So what we need to do is figure out how we get a little more credentials behind your name. Have you taken any other classes? He said, well, I took that mechanics class down at the YMCA. She goes, well, that's great. If you can put cars together, you can put people together. That's a great link there. That's a good start. He said, well, thank you. She said, we'll build on that. Now, you have to go to medical school. He says, how do I do that? She says, well, medical school is 8 years. It's $122,000 a year. She said, do you have any money? He said, well, she says, I found $20 in the Folgers can in the garage. He goes, oh, baby, that was your birthday money. She goes, I'm willing to put it towards the cause. We got $20. You got any more money? He said, well, I got a $10 bill in the truck I keep in case we run out of gas. She says, we're up to $30. Let's go fill out a bank application loan. Now, what are we going to put for education? graduated 8th grade with honors. You got $30 to apply towards a loan. Honey, we're moving and grooving here. She said, now we do need an ISO 9000 accredited facility for you to do surgery on, unless you're going to work down at the hospital. She said, we could use the garage. He said, well, babe, I didn't know that. I don't want to park my truck out in the rain. He said, I'll tell you what, let me rethink this and look at our strategies and go over our fiscal and fiduciary assets, and I'll get back with you tomorrow. Maybe I ought to work a little more while she said, I already called your boss, and he said, you're welcome back anytime. Now, did she tell him he doesn't have the education? Did she tell him you don't have the money? Did she tell him you don't have the wherewithal? But did she say anything rude to him? What can I do to help you? Now, she kind of knew the odds of him becoming a brain surgeon are probably slim and none. Mostly none, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But she treated him with love, respect, while speaking the truth in love. Excuse me. Honey, it's going to take some preparation to get you to where you want to go. What a wonderful wife. She helped him. She informed him. She spoke the truth in love and loved him for who he was. Now, I counseled a couple just the other day. Romans 2:1 says, therefore, thou art inexcusable, O man, whoever you are that judges another. For wherein you judge another, you condemn yourself, because you do the same thing. And I asked this couple, they've been coming to me for a couple weeks now, and I said, what's the problem? She says, we argue over everything. We fight over everything. We fight over little things. And I said, that's got to be the strongest indictment I've ever heard. We fight over little things. I tell people, if I'm going to get in trouble, I'm going to get in trouble big. If you're going to send me to prison, I'm going to prison for a reason. I'm sitting there talking to some of the other inmates. I go, what are you in here for? He said, I beat up a man who was flirting with my wife. Dang. What are you in here for? I shot a man who tried to break into my house. Dude, what are you in here for? Well, I did this, this, and this. Man, what about you, Kitay? What are you in here for? Well, I shoplifted a People magazine for my wife because I left my wallet in. And then I burned down the store as I made my getaway. I'm not going to prison simple. Guys, I'm not arguing with my wife over simple. So I said, what was your last argument? She said, I parked my car in the street because the kids came over to visit and the driveway was taken. I said, okay. She said, after they left, I asked my husband, would you move the car into the driveway for me? And he said, I'll be glad to. I said, okay. I said, so what was the argument? He said, well, when I got there, she said, thanks a lot for not bringing my phone in. I said, what? She said, well, I left my phone in the car. And he went to move the car, and he left it out there. And I said, you couldn't bring my phone in for me? And he said, I wasn't thinking about it. She said, well, it was right there on the dashboard. I know you saw it. I said, so wait a minute. You're mad at him for not bringing the phone that you left in the car in the first place in. How come you're not mad at yourself for not bringing the phone in? Therefore, thou art inexcusable, O man, whoever you are that judges another. For when you judge another, you condemn yourself, because you do the same thing. You left the phone in the car, but you're mad at him for leaving the phone in the car. I said, now, could you have possibly said, sweetheart, I'm sorry, I left the phone in the car. Would you mind to get it for me? And he would have said, all right. Y'all had an argument because he didn't bring a phone in, and it ruined your whole night. I said, was that worth $125? And she said, well, probably not. That's what I charge for an hour of counseling is $125. I said, so you come to tell me, well, he didn't bring the phone in. We had a big fight. And then you admit, but I didn't bring it in either. So why are you so mad at him? Now, this is human nature. I told my boss one time, I said, you low-down snake, sneak, cheat of a man. He goes, what's the matter? I said, I am $50 short in my paycheck this week. He said, and you're upset about it? I said, yes. He said, but last week, when I overpaid you $50, I noticed you didn't say a word. I said, well, that's because I can overlook one mistake, but two in a row, that's too many to handle. See, when you make a mistake in my favor, I can be very tolerant and forgiving. When you balance the mistake and it's not in my favor, righteous judgment, well, it's not really righteous, unrighteous judgment pours forth. Guess what? Why am I wrong? Why am I right to be mad at him for shorting me $50, but I'm not mad at myself for taking $50 without mentioning, hey, boss, I think you overpaid me. This is the position we find ourselves in as humans, even as Christians. Now, third, number one, all behavior is chosen. Number two, you can't talk me into doing something that I don't want to do because we make choices. But I tell people, here's something that you need to consider. The choices that you make, what is your motivation and where does that motivation come from? Now, am I influenced by my parents, by my peers? You know, teenage years are difficult. Children rely on their parents until they reach the stage of independence. Then they rely more on their friends for their emotional needs and for their comfort and their confidence. But what happens if they get bad friends? What if they get friends that are contrary to their upbringing? Well, now they have to weigh. You know, mom and dad said this, but my best friend says this, and, you know, who do I want to please? Who do I want to make happy? So we debate with ourselves. Now, the definition of schizophrenia is called a divided mind. Schizo meaning divided, phrenia. But I tell people, all schizophrenia really is, it's a decision that you haven't quite reached. Have you ever argued with yourself about spending money? Well, I really want that, but it's a little expensive. Well, you know, I could say, well, you know, maybe I could find it cheap. I could buy it on Amazon. Who are you arguing with? Yourself. Are you schizophrenic? No, because you're in control, and what you're doing is you're exercising reason and logic and trying to reach a decision. The people who are labeled schizophrenics are the ones who say, I can't help myself. I don't know where these thoughts are coming from. But the fact is, they're your thoughts. And more people are finding out all we have is a war in our members. Now, I am a minister of the gospel. I got saved in 1984, entered the ministry quite rapidly after I got saved, and I've been a minister ever since. However, in my previous vocation, I taught karate and kung fu. So now I come out of my apartment, and this big old guy bumps into me trying to get into the elevator. And he doesn't say anything. So I say, excuse me. He goes, watch where you're going. Next day, bumps into me. Watch where you're going. Next day, bumps into me. And the minister in me says, have mercy. Demonstrate the love of Christ. Be patient. Remember, he suffered for our sins. Be Christ-like. And the Bruce Lee in me says, he ain't that big. Go for it. Now, we hear expressions that express this because we'll say, on the one hand, but then on the other hand, on the one hand, so now I've got a war in my members. With my mind, I serve the law of God. With my body, I serve the law of Kung Fu. But I don't want to feel guilty about this because I don't want to bring a reproach on the name of Christ. So what happens? I beat the stuffing out of him. And the judge says, Alan, I can't believe you beat that man up. I go, it wasn't me. It was Bruce. What? I said, yeah, there's another me inside of me. And he's always fighting to get out. His name's Bruce. He said, any relation to Bruce Lee? I said, well, yeah, I'm actually his younger brother, barely. But anyway, I beat the guy up. Bruce beat the guy up. And the judge, who's a very wise man, says, well, I'm going to throw Bruce in jail for 6 months, and you figure out how you're going to work the habitation arrangement. No. If you throw Bruce in jail, I got to be there with him. Well, you guys work it out. But one of you is going to jail for beating this man up. See, so we divide our mind because we don't want to feel guilty. Now, in secular psychology, they call this ego defense mechanisms. I've got to think of what's happened in the best possible way to make me look not so guilty. Our parents call it lying. Some people call them rationalizing. And I like that word, rationalize. And that's what they are. They're very rational lies. Well, he deserved it. Well, guess what? What did I base my choice on? Did I base it on the fact that I'm a Christian and I need to be humble? I need to enter into Christ's suffering. I need to realize that not everything goes my way. Or do I base it on a self-centered approach? I can't believe he did this to me. See, the Bible talks about anger and pride. Every emotional problem that people have is based on anger. Definition of anger: I didn't get what I wanted. That's all anger is. Now, how mad you are depends on how much you wanted something. For most of you here, if I said, sister, I left could I borrow $1 to get a cup of coffee? I'll pay you back next Sunday. You'd say, sure, Brother Kitay, here you go. Now, if I don't bring it up next Sunday, you're not going to be mad at me. You're not going to be waiting for me in the parking lot with a shotgun. You're not going to have your husband towering over me. In fact, the odds are you might let it slip. It's only $1. But if I said, can you loan me $1,000 until payday, and I promise I'll pay you back next Sunday, come Sunday, you, your 6'4" husband, your 3 sons, and your 2 next-door neighbors are going to say, we come here to help her get her $1,000 back. I said, well, I don't have it. Her first response is going to be, well, that's okay, I forgive you. Her first response is going to be left knee or right knee. Which one are you willing to give up this weekend? See, the more we want something, the angrier we are when we don't get it. And it doesn't matter what it is, and everybody has their own value system, okay? How much do you want this? And I tell people, the Bible has all these different words. We have likes, we have wants, we have desires, we have lust, we have needs, but they're all basically, what do I want and how badly do I want it? And this is what motivates us. Number one, and this is where we get in trouble, we're motivated by what do I want? Now, every now and again we get altruistic. I tell my wife, what would you like for Christmas? And she says, a new car. I said, okay, babe. Let's go down to the Toyota dealership, take a look, or maybe a Chevy. She goes, I'm actually thinking of Maserati or Porsche. And I tell her, I quote the scripture, the spirit is willing, but the wallet is weak. You know, honey, when I said a car, I meant on our side of town, not over there on the other side of the tracks where those people are. See, what happened? Well, I'm expecting this, and I get something that I don't want. Definition of anger: I didn't get what I wanted or expected. Now, the corollary to that is I got something that I didn't want. Now, it is human nature, when we do something wrong and get in trouble for it, we get mad at the people who's judging us. I'm driving down the road. Now, the sign out there says 65, but I thought it said 95 because, you know, a 6 and a 9 look so much alike when you're traveling that fast. And a police officer pulls me over. Why am I mad at the officer? He's just doing his job. Sir, do you realize don't you have anything better to do? Why aren't you chasing criminals? He said, I am, and I caught you doing 95 in the 65 zone. Oh, I don't like that label, and I'm mad at him. Who's the one that was speeding? Now, we get mad at people for doing the exact same thing we're doing. I'm going down the road, and I'm driving my 1962 piece of junkmobile, and this guy in a brand new Porsche passes me. So, I floorboard, and I catch up, and I pass him. And then he passes me again. And I drop down, and I pass him. He puts his Porsche in fifth, zooms by me, and waves. I beep the horn, cuss under my breath, and shoot him a friendly Texas gesture. But I don't use all 5 fingers because that's a waste of energy. Now, what am I so mad about? We're both doing the same thing. We're speeding down the road. We're racing each other, but he does it better than me. He beat me, and I am upset about it. So now, same thing 2 weeks later. I'm driving down the road in my 1962 piece of junkmobile, and this guy in a Porsche passes me, so I pass him. He passes me, and I go, watch this. See, I put in a 411 transmission. I put me in a Harley car. I rebuilt the engine. I got me a 360 board down, and I pass him. And as I pass him, I wave and smile. How come I'm not angry this time? Because this time I won. But here's the question. What did I win? I got no money. I got a police officer up there rounding the corner, getting ready to give me a ticket for doing 172. What did I win? Well, I have this satisfaction. I beat him. And what was the reward for that? A speeding ticket that's going to cost me an arm and 2 legs and take my car. That's way, way too fast. See, I heard the story about these 2 little old ladies driving their car, and a police officer pulls them over and says to the driver, ma'am, is there a problem here? She said, no, sir. Why do you ask? He said, you were going so slow. She said, officer, I was doing 10 like the sign said. He said, ma'am, that's the route number, not the speed limit. You're on I-10. She goes, oh. And he looks over, and there's the passenger is shaking and quivering. And he said, what's the matter with her? She said, well, we just got off of 288. I know. I'm going to pay for that later. But anyway, see. But the fact is, all behavior is chosen based on the information. I thought that was the speed limit. No, that's the route marker. You just came off of 288. Give her some coffee or something. Get her to a hospital. Well, I wondered why she was screaming hysterically. See? When we look at our behavior, the Bible said, let God be true and every man a liar. Now, for the psychology part, when God created Adam in the garden, he gave him 6 emotional needs. Now, all of our behavior is dictated by either our emotional needs or our survival needs. We need water. We need food. We need protection from the elements. We need comfort, But very rarely does anybody call me about survival needs. Dr. Kitay, I'm thirsty. Do you think I ought to get a drink of water? Well, yes, please. That'll be $125. Just send me a check. Thank you. No, most people, they get confused with their emotional needs. Now, we have 6 emotional needs. Number 1 is love. Number 2 is significance. Number 3 is freedom. Number 4 is self-discipline. Number 5 is emotional awareness of ourself. Why do I feel the way I feel? And number 6, we need to know a higher power. Now, 90% of our behavior is based on meeting these needs. Not only do I have to love somebody, I have to believe that they love me. Not only do I have to feel like I am capable and competent and worthwhile, I have to believe that somebody else sees that in me. I feel that I should have the freedom to make my own choices and not be dictated to. A lot of school teachers, they come into this burnout period. It's not that they don't like teaching, but they feel like they're trapped. What can you do? You graduated college with a degree in Polynesian philosophy. And you are teaching Polynesian philosophy as an elective in the state of Texas. And all of your students love your class. Both of them think you're wonderful. And your principal comes and says, we may not be renewing your classes for next year because of the low attendance. Well, that ain't my fault. I'm an excellent teacher. That's true. But you're teaching Polynesian philosophy in Texas. Now, what are you going to do with a Polynesian philosophy degree if you're not a teacher? I am certified to teach Texas history. And if you're not working as a teacher or an author, what are you going to do with your Texas history degree? I'm going to join all the game shows and hope they have history as one of the, see. It's not that we don't like what we're doing, but we feel trapped. Now, right below that, we need self-discipline. We have to think, not only do I have the freedom to choose, but I make good choices. Do I pay the rent or play the ponies? Do I buy groceries for my family or another round for my friends? And the people that keep making bad choices, they're the poor people. I can't believe I did that. Man, I'm just no good. I just. Now, if we're Christians, we say it different. I just can't get the victory. No, instead of saying, I continually sin, I continually disobey God, we say, I just can't get the victory. We need to be aware of our own emotions. Why do I feel the way that I feel? What are the thoughts that lead me to this? And then we need to know a higher power, up to and including God. How many times have you ever been threatened, I'm going to talk to your supervisor, I'm going to call your mother, I'm going to talk to your boss? See, we want to appeal to somebody that outranks me. See, do you know why I say, I'm going to call your boss? Because I have no authority over you, and I realize that, so I have to threaten you with something. I'm going to take you to court. The judge will make you do that. See, we need a higher power. See, unfortunately, we can't wreak havoc and destructions on our enemies by prayer because God doesn't answer those prayers. Oh, Lord, let her have a flat tire. Let her be late for work. Lord, let her car not start. Lord, let the hail hit her car and not mine. God doesn't answer those prayers. So I call these fantasy revenge. Everybody goes through this once in a while. You know what I'd do? I'd have taken nail and I'd scratch your car and I'd bust out our headlights and Now, we won't do it, but for those 30 seconds, boy, don't we feel like we're large and in charge. If I could, I'd flatten every time. This is our base nature, and we bring those thoughts subject. The Bible said bring every thought captive to obedience to Christ. But we have those moments. Now, I want you to know we have the Spirit of man, we have the Holy Spirit. The first voice that always speaks is the Spirit of man. And we make ourselves feel good by comparison. The Bible said in the last days, we will compare ourselves with others. My wife says to me, I wish you wouldn't yell. I say, well, at least I don't beat you like Bill does his wife. Honey, I don't think you should hit me. Well, at least I don't do drugs like Charles. Honey, you need to quit doing drugs. Well, at least I'm not out robbing banks and selling drugs. See, we always find somebody worse than us to make us feel better. Nobody ever responds Christ-like the first time. My wife says, honey, I wish you wouldn't raise your voice. You're right, honey. I should be more like Christ. I need to emulate the King. I need to follow the Lord's instructions. Nobody ever says that. We just find somebody worse. And I tell people, this is why if you're choosing a wife, for remarriage, you need to find out who she was married to. Tell me about your first husband. Well, he was a missionary working in a third world country with impoverished children. Where is he now? Well, he died, while rescuing kids from an avalanche. Oh, no, I ain't marrying her, because what am I going to hear all the time? My first husband, no. Where's your husband? Well, he's in jail. He was selling drugs, and he wouldn't support me, and he was mean. Okay, I might be able to compete with that. And it's a shame, but I hear this all the time. We don't like being compared to people better than us, but we love being compared to people that are worse than us. Now, we need love, and we need significance, and we need freedom. Now, when these needs are in balance, I wish I had 6 fingers, but you'll just have to imagine one right here. When the needs are in balance, we're okay. We're content. And we'll talk about contentment in just a moment. But when these needs are not being met, we find ways to meet them, and it always involves a violation of a biblical principle: lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, pride of life. So when our emotional needs are not being met, we feel angry, we feel sad, we feel cheated, because God made us with these needs. The trouble is, because of our fallen nature, we get these out of proportion, disproportion, we get them met incorrectly, and then we set these standards that are not God's standards, and it causes nothing but confusion. Now, when the need is out of balance, everybody has one need that they prioritize. But if you prioritize it too much, it becomes a character trait that you're identified with. Now, without naming names, I'll give you 6 definitions, and each of you will think of somebody. When the love need is out of balance, you don't feel loved. These people overcompensate, and these are the ones who can't say no to anybody, and they always get taken advantage of. Could you loan me $20? Well, that's all I've got. Well, I really need it. Well, okay, here. Why'd you loan him the $20? Well, I hate to say no to people. He really needed it. They get taken advantage of. The girl who can't say no when she's going out on a date. The guy that's always giving away. Can I use your car? Can I borrow could you get me the people who can't say no? Their love need is predominant and out of balance. When a person needs significance and doesn't get it, their significance need is out of balance. They respond one of 2 ways. They either lie or they judge. Everybody here knows somebody, no matter what you say, they did it better. I went to Italy last year. Oh, I've been to Italy twice. Well, I'm thinking about buying a Mercedes. Well, I'm thinking about buying a Lamborghini. You are not. Well, I went to this college. Oh, I've been there before. And you say, why are you lying? Well, they're trying to compete with you and feel significant. Now, very close to that is judging. When I want to feel significant, I become judgmental. Why? Because by very definition, the judge is higher than the person being judged. I love to watch any kind of contest. It doesn't matter what. The beauty pageant. They take 1,000 girls from 50 states and whittle it down to one girl from each state. These 50 meet and they whittle it down to 3. The second runner-up, the first runner-up, and Miss America. And they say, and now Miss America is... And there's always that one person who says, I don't think she's that pretty. I wouldn't vote for her. And I always do the same thing because I want to be helpful. I go, here, you need these worse than I do, obviously. Here's me playing the piano. Dun, dun, dun. The only thing I can play are trips, and it doesn't matter what the song is. Silent night, holy night. One glad morning we shall see Jesus in the air. Everything is trips. I am not a very good piano player. But when I watch the American Music Awards, they'll say, and the entertainer of the year, who has sold 40 million albums, who plays 13 different instruments, who sings his own backup vocals, is, you know, I never thought he was that good of a singer, to be honest with you. I don't think he's that good of a musician. We judge and we put everybody else down as if that makes us bigger. And what do all the people do? They go, shh, would you be quiet? We're trying to watch this. See? When people need freedom and their freedom need is out of balance, these are the ones that don't pay attention to social function. You know somebody who's always late? That's because they want to make an entrance and be noticed. I attended a church in Houston, and they had a rule. If you came late after the preacher started preaching, then you stayed out or you went to the video room. Because what happens, people come in late, and then they're a disruption. Oh, sister, how you doing? How's everything? Hey, Tashana, good to see you. How are you doing? And preacher's up here trying to preach the word of God. This guy doesn't care. He wants everyone to know that he has arrived. So they started shutting the doors, saying, if you're not there when the preacher starts, you get to watch on. And people would get so angry. Well, you know, I got stuck in traffic. Well, there's 5,000 people at this church, and 4,999 of them got here on time, so you get to wait in the waiting room. And they get upset about it, but they're late all the time. Have you ever had a formal affair? It's a black tie suit, you know, and everyone's dressed up, and this guy shows up in slacks and tennis shoes. In other words, you're not going to impose your dress code convention on me because I'm free. You know somebody who says, I can't work a 9-to-5 job. I want to set my own hours. So you're an unemployed bum. No, I am a self-employed entrepreneur looking for the right opportunity. You've been offered 10 jobs. No, I'm not a clock watcher. I'm not a clock puncher. Their freedom need. Then you meet the person whose self-discipline need is not met. They don't do what's right. They keep making wrong choices. They just can't get the victory. And these are the ones that have to force you to comfort them. I'm no good. You'd be better off without me. I just keep making the same mistakes. I'm no good. And you're supposed to say, no, you know, baby, you'll get there. You know, you're working at it. You know, you're getting better. Now, I have this personal philosophy that I employ once in a while. What's the value of having a degree in psychology if you don't use it to mess with your friends once in a while? So somebody would come to me and say, I'm no good. I'm a loser. I just keep fouling up. I go, yes, and I'm glad you finally admit it. You know, that's the first step to overcoming your... What? I mean, no, you're not. You're a good person. You'll get better. See, their significance comes by telling you how horrible they are. Now, the Apostle Paul said, I'm chief of all sinners. But what was his reasoning? I persecuted the church. I led people to their death. I disobeyed God. But we meet people, I'm chief of all sinners. And I'll ask them, do you ever kill anybody? No. You ever murder anybody? No. You ever burn down a church? No. Well, then there's other people that got you beat. But their significance comes from telling you how bad they are because they want you to say, no, you're not that bad. See? I cooked dinner for my wife. And I said, I know, honey, it's not very good. I'm sorry. She goes, oh, thank God. I was trying to figure out how to tell you diplomatically that it was not good. No, I'm just teasing. See, whenever my wife and I do a marriage conference together, I always tell jokes in the first person. And this backfired on me one time. We were doing a conference together, and I said, you know, my wife and I were talking about authority. And finally I said, I'm the head of this house. I run this family. You can't tell me what to do. Quit telling me what to do. And my friend said, oh, my God, what was she saying? I said, she was saying, come out from under that bed, you coward. I said, no, I'm the head of the house. I don't have to listen to you. And this lady turned to her and said, did that really happen? And she said, no, it's a joke. Oh, I was just wondering. I tell about another time we were discussing authority, and I said, look, I'm the head of the house. I'm the boss. I wear the pants in this family. And my friend said, well, what did Carrie say? I said, oh, she already left the room. It was safe. I could say whatever I wanted at this point. And this lady said, did that really? So now whenever I do something, I say that may or may not be a true story, and the emphasis really is on the may not part of it, see. But I tell people, why do we have all these struggles, all of these controversies? And here's why. We walk one foot in the world, one foot in the church. The love test, 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. Love is kind. It's the first two. So I say, I want to be a better person. And Pastor Johnson says, well, read 1 Corinthians 13 and ask yourself, am I doing what it says in 1 Corinthians 13? So I take the love test. I go, am I patient? Yes. Am I kind? Yes. With that little fake humility smile. And so I go to my wife and I say, honey, I'm trying to be a better person, better husband. Pastor told me to take the love test. Now let me ask you, do you think I'm patient? And she says, well, I go, hurry up, I got more questions. And she says, well, I'm trying to. I say, okay, we'll come back to that. Do you think I'm kind? And she says, well, to be honest with you, not always. I go, you blonde-headed bimbo, name one time I haven't been kind to you. I can't believe you said that. The rule, the way we see ourselves is not always the way others see us. Here's a rule that is always true. I don't care who you are. The way we see ourselves is not the way God sees us. Now, I want you to understand, we do the things that we do because we have a fallen nature. Luke, the Bible says, ask, and you shall receive. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, it'll be open to you. And then the Lord asked his disciples, he said, if you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children. Wait a minute, what did you just call us, Lord? We follow you and we walk after you and we're learning your ways. And he gives them credit on an earthly level. He said, which of you being a father, if the son asked for an egg, would give him a stone? Or if he asked for fish, would give him a serpent? None of you. If you being evil know how to give good gifts. Wow. Jesus was talking and he said, my Father in heaven testifies of me. The scriptures testify of me. The works that I do testify of me. But the Bible said, but he would receive no testimony from men because he knew what was in them. And I tell people, think about your own shortcomings. Think about your own faults. Think about your sins and picture trying to endorse the Lord. Dear sir, it is with great honor and privilege that I recommend my friend Jesus to you. He is a great man. You should hire him. Signed, Moses. And somebody says, Moses, isn't he the guy that killed that Egyptian a while back? So you've got murderers recommending you. Dear sir, it is with great honor and privilege I recommend Jesus Christ to you. I think you should listen to him. He's a great and wise person. Signed, King David. Wait a minute, isn't he the guy that murdered a woman's husband so that he could have relations with her and then lied about it? Dear sir, you ought to listen to Jesus. He's a great man. Signed, Peter. Aren't you the one that betrayed him and lied about it? And aren't you the one that cut off the guy's ear? And aren't you the one with the anger issues? Wow, Jesus, you sure got some good friends recommending you. I tease my friends all the time. At least I hope I'm teasing them. They'll say, Alan, could you write me a letter of recommendation? I said, you sure you want to admit to people you know me? Does that person know who I am? They go, no. I said, oh, well, then I'll be glad to write you a letter of recommendation. I thought it was somebody that knew me personally. How many of you are without sin, without faults, without flaws, that you could write a letter of recommendation and nobody judge it? Well, the ones who followed Jesus didn't have that. And they were the cream of the crop. They were the disciples. They were the called ones. They were the chosen ones. And yet not a one of them had a testimony that the Lord said, well, he'll tell you about me. He said he would not receive testimony of men because he knew what was in them. So now, over the years, we go from Adam in the garden, who's created with these emotional needs: love, significance, freedom, self-discipline, emotional awareness, and the need to know a higher power. And now we get the detractors, the ones who say, we don't need God. The Bible is a book of myths. So let's go back to the biggie, the guy that, theoretic, Sigmund Freud. He was born and raised Jewish, and he denied God, he denied the Bible, he denied his parents, and he started analyzing himself. He had drug problems, he had nightmares, he had phobias, and he said, I'm going to study myself and come up with a cure. Now, the Bible says a bad tree does not produce good fruit. So here's a human with all kinds of problems, and he said, I'm going to study myself and come up with a cure. Nobody does Freud psychology anymore. There's watered-down versions and expanded. But here's what Freud did. He renamed what he learned. Now, I'd like to tell you a poem that I wrote. It doesn't always rhyme, but you'll get the point. Miriam was the owner of a small sheep whose color happened to be white. And everywhere that Miriam went, the sheep followed her, whether it was day or night. One day it followed her to her academic institution of higher education, and all the other children laughed. Thank you very much. Does that sound vaguely familiar to you? Well, that's an original poem that I wrote. Well, here's what Sigmund Freud did. He said, I don't believe the Bible. Bible said man is body, soul, and spirit. And Freud said, no, man's personality is dictated by the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is what man wants. The superego is what man should do. And the ego moderates between it. Well, doesn't that sound a whole lot like body, soul, and spirit? But Freud denied the Bible, and people said, wow, he's really wise and smart. Then this other guy comes along and says, no. He makes it too complicated. Man's nature is parent, child, adult. The child says, here's what I want. The adult says, no, here's what you need. And the parent arbitrates between. Doesn't that sound like body, soul, and spirit? But this guy denies the Bible. Then this other one comes along and says, no, that's too parent, child, adult. We have personality A, personality B, personality C. And we just use a process of logic to decide what we want. This one says, I want it. The other one says, well, is it good? And the other one says, can we afford it? It's amazing how all these theorists sound so much like the Bible. Sigmund Freud, id, ego, superego, right out of the Bible. Person-centered therapy, Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers won a Nobel Peace Prize for his book on becoming a counselor. And he came up with this person-centered therapy. And he said a counselor should be genuine, should be empathetic, and should have unconditional positive regard. Wow, that sounds exactly like Jesus. However, Carl Rogers' father was a Presbyterian minister. He grew up in the church, and when he went to college, by his own revelation in his book, he said, there I learned science, and I learned the truth, and I put away the foolishness of the Bible. Yet his counseling theory sounds remarkably like the person of Jesus Christ. Now, I did a research. There are over 700 schools of psychology, but they all branch from 10 main schools, and they change them up a little bit, And of the 10 major theorists who came up with these schools of psychology, all 10 of them were atheists. And they all stated the same thing: we can understand man apart from God. And this is where the so-called war between theology and psychology came from. People saying, I don't believe the Bible. And people say, but people are helped by their counseling. I said, well, let's take a look. I had a man last week tell me, I don't believe the Bible. I said, yes, you do. He said, no, I don't. I said, yes, you do. He said, I don't know if I believe the Bible or not. I said, you should, but you don't, obviously. I said, you believe the Bible. He said, why are you saying that? I said, do you want your wife to cheat on you? He said, no. I said, do you want people to lie about you and steal from you and kill you? He said, no. I said, do you think your children should obey you? He said, yeah. I said, then you believe the Bible. You just don't want to admit who wrote it, and the things that are above your recognition, you don't want to accept it. I don't believe Jesus walked on water. Okay. I don't believe that Jesus raised the dead. Okay. I don't believe Jesus healed a leper. Okay. What about when your friends testify? Well, that's psychosomatic, and they weren't sick to start with. And wait a minute. Why does modern science say that people who pray have a 30 to 40% better recovery rate than people who don't pray? Why do studies show that people who are raised in a religious home, regardless of the denomination, have happier, more fulfilled lives and are less likely to commit crimes and go to prison? You cannot tell me that there's no impact of religion when science says yes, there is, even if they can't explain it. I tell people believing in God to me is a lot like believing in gravity. I've never seen gravity. But if I stand up on a roof and say, I don't believe in gravity and jump, I'm going to find gravity believes in me. If I say I don't understand gravity and I jump, I'm going to find out gravity works the same regardless. If I say there is no gravity, I'm going to find out that I was wrong. And God says this about himself. He said, does your unbelief make void the word of God? God forbid. I don't believe in God. Well, that doesn't mean that you're right and he's wrong. Well, I don't think God did all these things. Now, I was preaching at a youth conference one time, and I was joking. As you can tell, I like to tell jokes. And the pastor introduced me, and to be honest with you, he put a little too much emphasis on my educational attributes. I have a PhD in psychology from International Christian University. I have a master's degree in counseling from International Christian University. I have a master's degree in theology from International Christian Institute, an unrelated school. I have a master's degree in educational counseling from Prairie View A&M. I'm certified to teach English and sociology in the public school. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of the State of New York. So he was talking about my education experience and stuff, and I really wanted him to emphasize that I'm a child of God. So then he asked me a question. He said, to what do you owe your educational accomplishments? And I said, prayer. And he looked at the young man and said, wow, that's an interesting answer. Dr. Kitay, would you explain how prayer influenced your educational career? I said, absolutely. Every time it came time to take a test, I prayed that the man I was sitting next to you studied. And he's well, I said, no, I'm just joking. But here's the point that I make. This guy, every time he takes a test, scores 100. Every time this guy takes a test, he scores an 80, which is not bad. Every time this guy scores a test, he scores a 50. Who should I copy off of? Well, this guy's always right. Now, you cannot prove everything in the Bible, but there's nothing that you can disprove. Every scientific fact in the Bible is correct. The life is in the blood. The North Star doesn't move. The east and the west, you can't close the gap. Everything the Bible says scientifically is correct. History has proven the majority of the Bible. For years, they said there was no Hittite empire. There was no evidence of a Hittite empire. Man, it made all the newspapers and Bible Archaeology magazine when they found the civilization of the Hittites and their books and their writings and their pottery. But for years, people said there's no Hittite Empire. So I tell people, if all the things that can be proven are proven to be true, why would I doubt the things that you can't prove? I cannot prove to you today that Jesus walked on water, except that we have eyewitness testimony. I cannot prove to you that there's a heaven and there's a city and there's streets of gold, but if every other fact in the Bible is true, why wouldn't I extend that to the things that right now I can't prove? A friend of mine said, what's the first thing you're going to do when you get to heaven? And I said, well, I want to see Adam. I want to see Jesus first, but then I want to see Adam. He said, why? I said, I want to see if Adam had a belly button. And my friend wasn't a Christian believer, and he read enough of articles and things he said, well, you know, some people say Adam didn't make it to heaven. I said, in that case, when you get there, would you check it out for me and let me know? And I was joking, of course. But see, we have things that are made, and it confuses people. I had a friend of mine tell me, he said, this rock takes 20 million years to produce, but you're telling me the earth is only about 20,000 years old. And I said, well, God made everything fully formed. He didn't make Adam as an embryo and watched it grow. And he made Adam fully formed. So if you were walking in the garden, you'd see Adam say, how old are you? And Adam would say, oh, about 10 minutes. God just now made me. He said, no. For a man to be this big, you got to be at least 20 or 21. He said, no. God made me fully formed. So I agree with you. For this rock to make itself over again will take 20 million years. But God made the mountain fully formed. If you cut down this tree, you'd say, Adam, how old's that tree? He said, 1 day. Wait a minute, it's got 70 rings on it. Adam said, yep. When that tree reproduces and it gets to be that big, God has shown us that it'll be about 70 years old. But he made the tree fully formed. So if this is true, that God made everything fully formed and then said, go multiply, go reproduce, I agree. Adam, for you to have a son your size will take about 20 years. But God made you instantly, and this is how big you are. So see, there's no conflict with me between what modern science says versus what the Word of God says. All you have to do is discount what the Bible says. Now, I can prove anything if you allow me to omit facts. See? I was not late coming home last night. Unless, of course, you check the facts and ask my wife what time I got home, what time I said I'd be home, and what time I actually arrived. But if I can omit those details. I was reading in a magazine that somebody said Moses didn't really part the Red Sea. It was called the Reed Sea, and the water was only ankle deep. And that's how he was able to cross it. I said, well, you left off the part where the water came and drowned all the Egyptians. How did they drown in ankle-deep water? See, so if you allow me to leave off facts, I can prove anything. Now, have you all ever settled a dispute between children? Have you ever noticed they don't start at the beginning of the story? They start at the part that, why did you hit him? He called me a bad name. Why did you call him a bad name? Well, he was talking bad about my mother. You didn't tell me that. Why were you talking bad about his mother? Well, he was insulting my sister. You didn't tell me. Why were you insulting his sister? Well, you know, we got in a fight over a basketball game back in second grade. Well, wait a minute. Why'd you start here? Because psychologically, we want to defend ourselves. We want to give a reason. Now, why did you stand up when I asked you to? Here's the only right answer. I chose to. I waited. I thought about it at the speed of thought, and I said, this seems safe, and I did it. Now, at the speed of thought, did you know the speed of thought is half the speed of light? That's how fast the neurons and so when somebody says, I thought about it for about 5 seconds, I said, wow, That's like a gazillion miles. Because the speed of thought is that fast. It's half the speed of light. So somebody says, well, you didn't think about it very long. Well, how long does it take to go 186,000 miles a second? Let's half that, Wow, I thought about it for 187,000 miles in the last 2 seconds. Well, that's pretty, see? And that's why people say he makes snap decisions. The problem isn't do we think fast or slow. The problem is, do we think about right and wrong? Do we think about consequences? Do we think about choices? Now, put this down in your notes. Most people, when they argue, they want to be right. Instead of solving the problem. I asked a group of boys in my 6th grade class, you back out of your driveway and you hit a pothole. Next day, you back out of the driveway and you hit a pothole. Next day, you back out of your driveway, hit a pothole. I said, what should you do? And this one kid said, learn to go around. And this teacher said, no, you fix the pothole. I said, and that's the difference between children and adults. Adults say, let's solve the problem. Children say, well, just go around it. Well, park on the other side of the driveway. Park in the street. But they never think of solving the problem. Now, that's very simple. And every adult here said, probably, well, we'll just fix the pothole. We can get real political. We can ask Mayor Turner to fix the potholes, but then we'll keep hitting it every morning. See? But we'll edit that part out. See, here's the thing. Do we solve the problem? Honey, these eggs are rotten. They're horrible. They're runny. I can't believe you served this. Wow. Did you feel the love of Christ? How was breakfast? Babe, tomorrow, would you cook the eggs just a little bit more? I like my eggs solid. Oh, okay, honey, fine. Where's the argument? Where's the insult? Why not just solve the problem instead of fixing blame, being accusatory? See, I tell the story. One day I came home, and this is a true story. My wife said, honey, I burned the steaks. You know, when you have those special occasions, you go and you buy the steaks that are like this thick, and they take, like all day to cook. And she said we were going to have steak and potatoes. And she said, I burned the steak. I said, what happened? She said, well, I got distracted doing this, and this. I said, are the steaks repairable? And she said, no. I said, fine. Get your coat. Let's go to Roadhouse. And she goes, what? I said, well, you said we were having steak for dinner tonight. You said those are burned. Let's go get a steak. She said, you're not upset? I said, why? Did you do it on purpose to ruin my evening? She goes, no. I said, then why would I be upset? Things happen. I said, however, this is not a precedent. Every time you want to eat out, you don't have to burn something. You can just say, honey, can we go eat out tonight? See? But she was kind of amazed, because we were newlyweds, that I didn't. Why didn't you pay attention? You know how much those steaks cost? My God, woman. Guess what? We do things. We make mistakes. We lose track. We get distracted. See? Guess what? Here's the solution. Let's go eat steak somewhere. Wow, what a concept. Now, I have this theory. I can be nice to my wife, and we can have a nice, comfortable, romantic evening at home, snuggling and cuddling on the couch. Or I can be rude to my wife and spend a nice, quiet evening sitting on the couch alone, going, honey, are you still mad at me? Guess which one I prefer? Why not solve the problem? Here's the solution. Let's go eat out. No finger pointing, no blame, no accusation, no sarcasm. What's the matter? You don't know how to cook? See? My son one time, his mother said, would you get me a Coke from the refrigerator, please? And he got up, and I said, son, look at your mother and say, your leg ain't broken, is it? And he looked at me and said, why do you want me to say that to Mom? I said, I want to see if she remembers all the karate I taught her. Because you know darn well, if you talk like that to your mother, one of us is going to beat you. He said, yeah, I thought so. I'm going to go get the Coke. I said, wise decision, son. See? Now, my boys wanted an allowance. I said, all right. He said, you know, when we work around here, we should get paid. I said, all right. Name it and claim it. How much do you want? So they calculated, you know, how much could we gig Dad for and not get in trouble. And so they wanted 25 cents to make the bed, 25 cents to clear the table, wanted 50 cents for vacuuming. And it came up, they wanted like $6 a week allowance. I told them I'd give them 10. Oh, there's a God in heaven. Wow, this is so great. We're going to get $10 a week. And that lasted for one day. And here's why. They sat down, they had dinner. My wife made steak and baked potatoes and salad, gave them some soda pop. And I said, how was dinner, boys? They said, it was great. I said, you owe your mom $12.50 each. And they said, what? I said, well, if we got to pay you to work around the house, then we got to pay Mom too. She cooked you a meal, and she's not even charging you a lot for labor. Basically, you're just reimbursing her for the cost of the food and a couple pennies for her time. Oh, by the way, you owe her another $7. She told me she did laundry last night for you guys. So that's $19. And you had, oh, that's right, you had breakfast this morning. Let's make it $3. So you owe $22. So the $10 I owe you, you still owe me $12. We went to Walmart, and the new video game was out. And the video game said, Daddy, can we buy this video game? I said, sure, son, as soon as you save $50 plus tax. What? I said, well, I used to buy these for you, but you're working now. You're making your own money now, so you got to buy it on your own. I said, so at $10 a week, if you don't run up any other bills like food, water bill, electric bill, you can buy that in a couple years, easy. And they looked at me and, you know, sad. I said, guys, I don't do things for you out of obligation. I buy you toys and clothes and feed you because I love you. This is my job as your father. I said, but if you come and say, we want obligation, we want compensation, I said, then you can't be mad when somebody asks for the same thing. I said, so now I'll make a deal with you. You guys can talk it over. I can either buy you that video game and stop giving you an allowance and treat you like I've always treated you, or you can wait till you save $50, knowing that breakfast, lunch, and dinner cost more than you make all week. It didn't take them long to decide that they preferred love and charity and kindness and compassion over a paycheck. I was talking to a boy the other day that I was counseling, and I said, why should you obey your parents? He said, because God said obey your parents. Because, you know, they're the boss, they're in charge. I said, and that's why you struggle. You should obey your parents because they love you, and they take care of you, and they feed you, and they buy you clothes, and they help you when you're down, and they provide comfort. See, what we do, we get mad at rules. God bragged on himself. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, he said, what nation is there so blessed as to have a God so near like you have? What nation is there so blessed to have laws like I've given you? In other countries, if you steal, they cut off your hand. You steal again, they cut off your other hand. You steal again, they kill you. God says, I offer you a chance to repent. I offer you a chance to make restitution. I love you and I care for you. And if you keep my commandments, I'll keep you safe. But we say, look at all these rules and regulations. Oh, my goodness. Instead of saying, I appreciate my parents who say, you can't play in the street. You can't put that thing in your mouth. You can't go to that place. They're not mean. They love you and they care for you. But as long as you keep saying, I have to obey them, you'll be at conflict because you don't recognize the great love coming your way. And because we have this rule, why should I listen? How many people are guilty of saying, because I said so, that's why? Wow, that really explained a lot. One day my son asked if he could play in the street. Wanted to play basketball with some of the bigger boys. I said, no, son. And he kind of got pouty, and I said, are you upset? He said, well, I wanted to play basketball. I said, son, You're 9 and they're 15 and 16. Look how big they are. I said, they'll knock you down and they'll hurt you. You land on that street, your bones aren't formed yet. You can break a bone, you can injure yourself. I don't want you in the street because cars go speeding through this neighborhood, and at your size and your coordination, you might not get out of the way in time. I said, son, I don't let you play in the street because I love you with all my heart, not because I'm mean to you. God said, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't commit murder. Not because he's a mean, vicious God, but he's trying to keep you safe. He's trying to demonstrate his love. But psychologically, because we have a fallen nature, which is rebellion, which is shame, which is anger, which is pride, we don't receive the love. I was counseling a young boy. His parents were divorced. And he was bragging about his dad. He said, my dad, on my birthday, gives me $100. I said, what does your mother give you? He said, sometimes I get $3, sometimes I get $5. I said, wow. I said, your mother's really wonderful. He said, what? I said, your dad has nothing to do with you except on your birthday, and he gives you $100. Your mother feeds you every day. Your mother buys you clothes for school. Your mother gives you presents. Your mother gives you food and a place to live. Do you know how much that cost? But your dad comes, and one day out of the year goes, here's $100. I said, that's a far less cry from what your mother spends on you every single day. And it changes. He never thought about it that way. He got $100. I said, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? He said, scrambled eggs and bacon. I said, go down to Denny's. That's $6. Multiply 6 times 30. That's $180 a month your mother spends just for breakfast. And she does this every day, and your dad shows up with a $100 bill once a year. I said, son, your priorities are backwards. But see, this is the psychology of us. We measure the great things, but we don't take into consideration all things. We try to be happy all the time. We want to live on the mountaintop. But the Bible says, I have learned to be content in whatever state I'm in. See, and I tell people, you can't be happy all the time. And unfortunately, you can't be happy for as long as you're mad. Anger lasts longer than happiness. I tell people, on my last birthday, had a big gala. All my friends showed up for my birthday party, and both of them brought me a gift. I was so happy. And I talked about it like the next day and the day after and by the end of the week, I was done talking about my wonderful birthday party. But I had a guy do me wrong. He borrowed $5 and didn't pay me back. I talked about him for months. Every time somebody says, do you know? I said, yeah, you know, he borrows money, doesn't pay you back. You know, he still owes me money. Why am I keeping? Because anger lasts longer than happiness. Why? Because we have a fallen nature. Now, when somebody calls me for counseling, I know 3 things about them before I've ever met them. Number 1, there's a lack of a satisfying, significant relationship. Number 2, our 6 emotional needs, or their 6 emotional needs, are not being met. And they're angry about it. Number 3, there's a belief they have that perpetuates their wrong behavior, and it's always a violation of a biblical principle. Well, I have a right to be mad at you. That's what the Bible said. The Bible said the anger of man does not work the righteousness of God. So don't talk to me about righteous anger. The Bible said, let all anger be put away from you, along with malice and clamoring and evil speaking. Instead, be kind, tender-hearted, forgiving. Now, how important am I in the great scheme of things? If the President of the United States, I don't care what your political affiliation is walking down the street with his Secret Service men, and they hear something that sounds like gunshot, who are the Secret Service men going to protect? Him or me? In fact, I may get drafted. We need you to protect the president. The fact is, in this society, the president outranks me in worth. Now, in the eyes of God, we're all equal. But in society, the president outranks me. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, how much more so God, the guy that created the universe? We sin against God and we say, I'm sorry, God, forgive me. And then we go away feeling good because we know that God forgives us. But if you sin against me, I'll bear a grudge. I'll be angry. I'll talk about you. I'll remember this, and you're definitely off the Christmas card list. What makes me so important that I can bear a grudge when God himself won't? Now, this attitude accounts for a lot of our problems. There are 3 laws out there. There's man's law, there's natural law, and there's spiritual law. And because we don't understand that, here's the spiritual law. What you put out comes back. It says it this way, whatsoever man sows, he reaps. We have the law of sowing and reaping. Whatever you sow, whatever seed you plant, if you plant an apple seed, you get an apple tree, correct? But here's the law that most people overlook. What comes out of a seed is always bigger than the seed you plant. And this works positively and negatively. If you tell a little lie just to get something, it's going to grow up to be a big lie. Somebody comes to me and says, what do you think of John? I'm thinking about promoting him. Oh, no, man, you don't want John. John, you know, he talks a good thing, but he's a slacker and he's hypocrite. No, you don't want him. Why am I saying that? Because I want the promotion. So now, a couple years later, I'm up for a big promotion. And he goes to John and says, thinking about promoting Kitay, what do you think? No, you don't want to do that. He's a slacker, he's a liar, he steals, you know, he embezzles, he brags about it to people. Man, not only do I not get the promotion, I get fired. I said, Lord, why did John lie on me like that? And he said, remember that seed you planted? It came back as an apple tree. Remember that little nut you planted? It came back as an oak tree. God will not be mocked. Whatever man sows, he reaps. Now, if we understood this, how much more would we guard our words, guard our actions, choose to plant right seeds? Honey, I burned the steak. Why, you bimbo, weren't you paying attention? My God, do you know how much that steak cost? What seed did I just plant? Is she now more inclined to talk nice about me? Is she feeling a lot more romantic now? You know, is she looking forward to telling me when something big happens? What's the number one problem in marriage? They'll tell you, lack of communication. My wife doesn't talk to me. My wife never tells me what's going on. That's probably because she's learned how you're going to react. Are you going to react Christ-like? Are you going to be the problem solver, or are you going to be the finger pointer and the blamer? Psychology says, I choose my behavior. But genuine psychology says, I choose my behavior based on my thoughts, my values, my beliefs, my attitudes. And then I have to ask, and who framed those? I tell people, when I go to heaven, the Lord's going to take my book off the shelf. And here's what I hope he does. I hope he opens it, flips through a couple pages, looks around. He says, oh, come on in, boy. That doesn't look too bad. Nah, you okay. Yeah, come on. Well, wonderful. Here's what I don't want to happen. Alan Kitay, born November 14th, 1954, 4:58 p.m., day 1. Not bad. Day 2. Not bad. Day 3. Got a little feisty with the nurses, did you? Had a little temper tantrum. Day 4. I said, Lord, what are you doing? He said, just what you asked me to do. I said, what? Guys, unforgiveness is so horrible because we invite a curse. Listen carefully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We sin against God with impunity and say, God, I'm sorry. He says, I forgive you. Somebody sins against me, I say, oh no, you got to jump through hoops. I'm going to bear this grudge. I'm going to spread it around. I'm going to let people know what kind of person you are. And God says, oh, that's how you want me to judge you when I see you? Every time you come to me and say, Father, forgive me, I've sinned, am I going to say, well, here's the conditions. We have misery in our life, and because I understand spiritual laws, when somebody comes to me and says, no matter what, it just doesn't work out. I've prayed and I prayed and I prayed and it doesn't work out. I ask them this one simple question. What kind of seeds have you been planting? How do you forgive people? How easily are you offended? This is our psychological nature. This is our psychological makeup. We're angry. We're ashamed. Adam and Eve sinned, and God asked two questions. And these are two great questions to ask people. Number one, where are you? Well, here's what's going on in my life. Da, 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 da. And then God said, who told you that? I had a man tell me, he said, you know, women are like drums. You should beat them regularly. And I say, wait a minute. That's not in the Bible. Who told you that? Where did you get that false information? Where did you get that lie from? Well, you know, Grandpa said, did Grandpa write one of the books of the Bible? No. Did Grandpa author any treaties? No. Did God appoint him the head of? No. Then why are you listening to him instead of God? Where did you get your information that you're basing? And people say, well, that's just the way I am. But that's not true. See, because we can respond differently. I'm speeding down the road, and my wife says, honey, you're speeding. I said, would you quit nagging me? I know what I'm doing. You know, leave me alone. I'm a good driver. Police officer pulls me over and says, sir, are you aware that you were speeding? No, officer. I must have not been paying attention. I'm so sorry. How quickly our nature changes. I used to teach martial arts, and back in my younger days, I would accompany sometimes some of the police officers that I taught. And I was always amazed. We'd answer domestic disturbance call, and you'd hear the screaming coming through the walls. Knock, knock, knock. Port Natures, please. Can you open the door, please? Yes, officer. Just like that, the arguing stops. We got a call from the neighbors that there was some yelling and screaming going on. Well, you know, officer, I think maybe the children had the TV a little too loud. Could we talk to your children, please? We don't have any. Oh, what a coincidence. All it took to end that argument was a knock on the door. It's a shame that they couldn't end the argument by an internal motivation called love. I had a man one time, and I asked him, I said, what brings you and your wife to my office for counseling? And he says, well, do you want the short version or the long version? I said, well, I get paid by the hour, so I prefer the long version. You probably would prefer the short version. He said, my wife is stupid. S-T-O-O-P-E-D, stupid, and I'm sick and tired of her, blah, 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 beep, 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 and blah, 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 beep, beep, beep. And his language would have made a sailor and a truck driver blush. And I pretended like I didn't even hear him. I said, I've got a question for you. He said, what's that? I said, what do you think Jesus looks like? He said, what? I said, I was wondering, what do you think Jesus looks like? He said, well, you know, tall, thin, got a beard, and it's a white robe. He goes, yeah. I said, I want you to picture Jesus sitting right there. He said, all right. I said, now I've got one question for you. He said, what's that? I said, what brings you to my office for counseling? He said, what? I said, now that you are aware that Jesus is in this room, I want to see if you use the same answer in his presence that you did in mine. And the man started crying. You know what? If we really believed that God was everywhere, if we really believed that Jesus was right here, how much kinder would we be? If we really believed that the reward was worth having, how much kinder would we be? How much more patient would we be? If we really thought that this is important, how much kinder would we act? What is the link between psychology and theology? The Bible said, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Now, this is all psychology is. I act according to my beliefs. I tell you the truth, ladies and gentlemen, when my wife is not in the room, I am bold and I speak my mind. And when my wife is in the room, I've gone from, because I said so, to, yes, dear, that makes perfect sense. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Guess what? We are motivated by what we want. So here's my question. Do you want a temporary life with a negative reward, or do you want life eternal? I tell people as a minister, sometimes working for God doesn't pay as much as some of the people in the secular world make. But it's got a great retirement program. Sister, do you live in a house or an apartment? Do you have a driveway? What's it made out of? Concrete. What's the street in front made out of? Concrete. Do you know why we use concrete to build streets? It's the cheapest, most abundant thing on the earth. Sand, water, little glue, and we got concrete. Do you know why the streets of heaven are paved with gold? It's the cheapest thing God has to work with. Here's a house, and the street is paved with gold. The fence is made up of jewels, and the house is never described. Paul said, eye has not seen, ears not heard, neither enter the heart of man what God has prepared, but it's revealed by the Spirit. All I know is if I pull up, somebody says, I've got a mansion for you. What's that? Oh, that's the driveway. It's made of pure gold. What's that? Oh, that's your fence. That's made up of... What's the house look like? I can't even describe it, but wait till you see it. You won't even be able to. Paul said, I've seen things in heaven that I can't even reveal to you. But if receiving the Holy Spirit felt this good, and the Bible said that's the down payment, I wonder what the rest of the picture is going to be like. Here's the link. God said, here's my way. Here's man who said, here's my way. And we spend our time in conflict. Who are you going to serve? The great battle is, am I going to listen to God, or am I going to listen to other voices? Paul said there are many voices blowing in the wind. Everything that Satan tempted Jesus to do was to disobey God. And what was the simple answer? See, we think spiritual battle is demons hurling lightning bolts and chains, and it's the word. If you be the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. It is written, thou shalt not live by bread alone. Well, jump, and the angel, thou shalt not tempt God. It is written. Well, I'll give you all the... No, you only worship God. Spiritual warfare is this simple. Shall I listen to God or listen to self? Psychology is this simple. Shall I listen to God or shall I listen to self? If you have any questions, we'll hang around for a few moments. It's 9:02, and here's the worldly part of me. Pastor, I get 2 minutes of overtime. Alan, you were 30 minutes late for church last week. Well, I can forgive one mistake, but two, you see what I'm saying? See. Do we exalt God or do we exalt self? Thank you for coming this evening. I hope you learned a little bit about psychology, which is self, and theology, which is God. God loves me far more than I love myself, and sometimes I just don't realize it or admit it. God bless you tonight. Thank you so much. We have